Born and raised in San Francisco, my guest today describes herself as a queer, bilingual, multi-hyphenated artist, Leo Sun, Scorpio rising, bruja, homegirl. She prioritizes collaborations that practice intersectionality and community empowerment. As a trauma-informed, student-centered teaching artist, she has developed national programming for community wellness through arts intervention for over 15 years and holds a slew of credits that include acting, writing, producing, mime, and improv. My guest is Marilet Martinez. I'm Aiden Nepom, and this is the Changed Podcast. Marilet, welcome to the Changed Podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm looking forward to this conversation. You know, in the first season of the Changed Podcast, I talked to a lot of people with an improv background. And then this season, most of my guests don't have that, or purposefully, like one of the authors I spoke with, Amy Gentry, she's the first episode this season. She took an improv class from me many years ago and was like, no, this is not for me. So I kind of went opposite direction to get more perspectives. And then I realized, okay, but that's a perspective that I still really treasure. And you do really cool things with improv. You're kind of, in my mind, a little bit of a trailblazer. So I wanted to bring you on the show and have that playful voice, but that, I don't know. I'm just doing all the talking. So I'm so glad you're here so that I could talk about my thinking.
I like listening. It's cool.
Here's what I would love for you to do. Marilet, will you tell the audience, the listening audience, a little bit about what you do? I know improv isn't the only thing that you do, but it's a big chunk of what you do. Will you just share with people what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am an actor, improviser, fight choreographer. I mostly come to performing from sort of the theater world, sort of the scripted theater world, which was a funny change in language that I had to get used to when I started primarily focusing on improv. I was like, oh, and I believe somebody referred to it as like the legit theater. And I was like, well, what the hell am I doing with improv if it's not?
Woof.
Yeah. It's very status. Theater loves a good status hierarchy. So within all of the performing that I do, I'm also a writer and a producer, director. And I'm also an educator. I'm a teacher. So I'm a trauma-informed teacher who works with usually non-represented in the majority for youth, sort of formally referred to as like at-risk youth. And I was like, all youth are at risk, all of them. They're all at risk for everything. All of us are.
Right.
So yeah.
So if you're not using that label, if you're not using the label at risk, what label are you using?
It changes. Like, I feel like the language around sort of the way we are trying to identify people who are maybe not as represented or who have been systemically impacted through, white supremacy or other systems of oppression, who are, then labeled as like underfunded or not, like coming from like these backgrounds as if they chose that life.
Right.
And, so
right.
So I choose to sort of say that I work with I work with youth who are dealing with a lot of things, and adult people who are dealing with a lot of things. Like, we all come to this world with different sized and different weighted backpacks. So I like to just sort of like be like, all right, show up with your backpack and let's see what we got. So. Yeah.
That's a nice way to put it. I like that. Show up with your backpack. Let's see what we got.
Yeah.
Well, part of why I was interested in talking with you is because I feel like, we are connected via social media. So I get just like these glimpses of ways that you are connecting your activism with your art. And I find that to be particularly inspiring. Would you talk a little bit about the connection between the two?
Yeah, absolutely. So growing up in San Francisco, I was surrounded by artists all the time and surrounded by people with a lot of political opinions. Be that either at home, in school, at society at large, but people had a lot to say and they were going to do it in like cool artistic ways. And so as a young theater practitioner, when I started doing work in the Bay Area as an actor, a lot of the work I was doing was really focused around community outreach and around sort of giving voice to political movements or issues that were really affecting people. And a lot of the shows I was getting cast in, and a lot of the companies that I was very attracted to, were doing work that was overtly messaged around either very leftist political leanings and
Yeah.
other ways of sort of like giving
In San
people the
Francisco?
opportunity. I
What?
know, shock, surprise, right? So I worked with the San Francisco Mime Troupe for a long time, and they do original comedic musical theater for free in the parks. They are a socialist theater company that's been around for 60 odd years in the Bay. They don't take corporate funding. They're collectively run. They're a very cool company. They're still around. Still, speaking truth to power as often as possible. And so I think sort of that foundation, and then my day job as a theater practitioner, as a young person, was doing assemblies for young people. So going to like elementary schools and junior highs and high schools and doing like health messaging that was appropriate for like those various age groups. So you get
Mhm,
into a
mhm.
lot of issues around sort of what young people are dealing with in terms of like the oppression they're facing, the issues that they're coming up against. This can look like food insecurity, home insecurity, dealing with abusive family members or partners, like all these things that was happening. And so because healthcare in this country is political, it sort of like extra ramped up that level of like, well, I'm doing art, but for a hospital. And sort of like what land does that put me in? It was very, very cool. I still sort of have connections with them. This was Kaiser Permanente's educational theater. And I've done a lot of programming for them and things, but it was just sort of always at the forefront of the art I was creating was like centering people whose voices aren't as dominantly heard and the issues that are facing them. And then when I sort of shifted and moved to Chicago, and or actually, I guess this was also in San Francisco as well. I met Marcia Aguilar or Kaylin through Leela, and her and I started a duo called Pura Pocha, and we started doing improv shows using loteria cards, which are like Mexican bingo cards. And we would like use them to sort of like force Armandos from audience members and do shows based on that. And it was really one of the first spaces as sort of just a primary improviser where I was like, oh, like I'm really getting to use sort of the wealth of my cultural self, as well as, I was getting to play sort of in a total way that I wasn't able to access in ways that, with other people.
And I just wanted to let the listeners who aren't from an improv background, I wanted to let you in on some of the lingo, which is you just dropped Armando in there. So that's a form of show where the players on stage utilize storytelling to inspire the performance on the stage. So you were using those loteria cards to get stories from audience members?
Yeah. So we had
That's awesome.
yeah, it was really cool. It was I just sort of in a rehearsal one day, Marcia and I were trying to figure out like, well, how do we lean further into like the cultural aspects of ourselves? Marcia was one of the first people that I got to like improvise in Spanish with on stage. And like got to sort of like make these references that when I made them in other circumstances, they were used, they were fine, but they just hit different because Marcia also had that same cultural knowledge and background, so she could hit back in a different way. It was just like, it was like finding, finding, like, I think of it as like the little bee girl at the end of the Blind Melon video when she finds all the other little bees. Like, where I was like, oh my God, she's one of my bees.
She's all grown up now.
I know. Like, she's the bee woman, whoever the bee woman is now. She's probably maybe has, tiny bees around her. But yeah, so getting to sort of play with Marcia and getting to sort of see one, sort of the response between her and I, and just sort of how satisfying that was to get to like experience that on stage with one another, as well as getting to introduce introduce audience members to this part of the culture or just something a little bit different, as well as affirm those in the audience who shared that same cultural reference or cultural background. So yeah, and then sort of fast forward that a bit to being here in Chicago and working with my current improv team, Ratas de Dos Patas. We met all doing, we were on a Spanish language team or Spanglish team for another team. The four of us sort of came together. Kendra, Jamaica, sort of brought us together and was like, I want to do stuff with you guys. And like one like cold Tuesday night at like 11 p.m. at IO, and we were like, yeah, okay, let's do it. And her initially what she said was, I really like you guys. I really think you're talented. I want to do something with you. I don't know exactly what that is, but I want it to involve like red lipstick and hoop earrings and like teaching the audience Spanish. And we all four went, yeah, okay, great. We're in, we're down. And so through this team, that was sort of like our initial foundation. But since then, we've done like a boatload of work in terms of bringing all of our cultural backgrounds, our contemporary viewpoints, all of those things, and really offer them to stage or offer them on stage as both like a celebration and a bit of a rebellion. So we like living in that space a great deal. Yeah, so that's a little bit about what I think.
Activism is sometimes that, right? Like activism is sometimes a combination of celebration and rebellion, actually. I never really thought of those two words in conjunction as a good definition, but to me that resonates. This idea that we're going to celebrate this thing that we are actively bringing to the forefront while we simultaneously rebel against the norms or status quo.
Yeah, absolutely. It's because I feel like you kind of need both, right? Like the if it's all rebellion all the time, that's a burnout. If it's all celebration all the time, that's a pass out. And you have to nourish yourself with something, right? While you're in these forms, while you're in this space of sort of coming up against something that you aren't necessarily the norm in. And so like it makes me think of what was it? I think shortly after Mike Pence became vice president, there was a huge like big gay dance party that happened like in front of his home somewhere in Indiana. Like people just like big rainbow flags, just like working the house down. And it was just like, you know what? Like we're gonna take this position that you have of being that's something that's very negative and hateful, and we are gonna just attack it with like song and dance and fierce intellectualism and change and joy. And I think joy scares the hell out of people. I really do.
I think that's right. I mean, that resonates with me. I work with a lot of companies, with teams and companies, and play is a part of what I do. It's not all of what I do. I facilitate in lots of different ways, but I definitely bring improv games to the table as a possibility sometimes, at times, depending on what's happening. And there is this reaction when people hear I come from a background of improv, of play, where they just tighten up because they're like, oh no, they're going to make me do something. And then it's, and I think the fear isn't that it's going to be joyful or fun. I think the fear is that it won't. But there's also this stigma around joy in the workplace, and finding the game of a conversation or whatever. It's like everything must be very serious for us to care about it. And I think I think that what's so wonderful about a project like Ratas de los Patas is like when I see a project like that where it's like you're bringing such joy to the stage, and I have seen y'all perform, and it was just like the amount of joy, pure joy in the room. It's one of you don't always get that with an improv show. Sometimes people and audiences who don't love improv theater can really quantify this well. You go to a show and there's something happening up there and they seem like they're having fun, but it's not really clear what's happening and it's uncomfortable and you feel awkward as an audience member. That does happen. That's legit a real thing that happens. Whereas with your show, which is in a language that most of the audience doesn't speak fluently, it's like the brain accepts immediately that you don't know what's going on in a way that doesn't always happen with an improv show, and opens up.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, really quickly, you do understand what's going on. It's kind of a magic trick. It's like you actually are following what's happening, and the joy that happens in the room feels co-created, even though the majority of what's happening happens on stage, but not all of it. There is a piece where the audience gets involved.
Yeah. So we explicitly in our show, we ask the audience for a phrase. We usually set up some sort of scenario, and then ask the audience for like, what's a phrase that you would want to know how to say if this scenario was happening in Latin American country X, and from some Spanish speaking country, what's a phrase you would want to know how to say in order to help you in this situation? And I think because of the learning component, I think we get excited when we learn things. And when we're in a space of, and we're very upfront about it. We're like, we play these sort of teacher characters up top, and we're like, we're going to teach you something. And I think people they just say, they accept it. They say yes. And they're like, okay, cool, here we go. So I think that sort of gets us a little bit of like immediate, like lean forward, a little bit of buy-in of like, oh, okay, this is going to be something different for me if they are people who are not Spanish speakers. And I think the part of that also that joy is as for us playing, because we usually poll the audience. You're like, okay, who speaks Spanish, who doesn't? So we can kind of sort of get a gauge for us of like, how heavy on the English do we have to be? How heavy on the Spanish can we be? And I think because we're asking the audience to sort of keep up with this phrase throughout the course of, a 20 to 35 minute set, they're kind of like, oh, there it is. Oh, there it is. Oh, there it is.
Do you think that your audiences are changed by the experience of seeing your show? Is that like too big of a statement to make?
I mean, it's a cool statement to make, so I want to say yes. I feel like yes. I think because traditionally in sort of the landscape of American improv, like we don't see a lot of bilingual performances. And so that makes us something different. We're all women. That makes us something different. There's 3.5 Mexicans, on stage. I'm half Salvadorian too. So I'm always like, oh, we could have been a whole. So I think there's a lot that we offer that it just from just a purely improv experience is different. And so then the fact that we're like, hey, we're bringing all of this different, all of these different references, this different language, different cultural aspects, all of this stuff. I think we get to open people's perspective about like what improv can be.
What do you think the relationship is between art and change? Like that's a really direct relationship. Somebody has the ability to open up in that moment. That's going to change them in some way. But do you think that there's a role to be played in broader change in the world through art? Or is it more about that sort of one at a time individual connection? Or maybe those aren't mutually exclusive?
Yeah, I don't know if they are, because I feel like there are both individual and collective experiences that we can have through an artistic medium that sort of can provide both of those things. When I think about like art that I've experienced that like deeply shifted me in terms of like my way of thinking about either one, what is possible in the creation of art, or two, content wise, like what does this make me think of? You know, like what is this? How is this changing my thinking?
Uh-huh.
And you know, those pieces that like you walk away with and they don't leave you. You know, you're still thinking about it after you leave the theater, after you turn off the TV, whatever, or you the gallery, wherever it is that you experienced it. Those, I think that is significant in that like it creates the individual and personal change. Art is an inherent part of like our human experience, and change is also an inherent part of our human experience.
Speaking of change, what is your personal relationship with change? When you hear that word, like what kind of feelings or thoughts come or definitions come up for you?
Yeah. Oh man, so many. I feel like initially, like I'm one of those people who I'm very like go with the flow. I'm very flexible, and that's sort of the outside idea I've had about myself. And then when I really get down to it, I'm like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm completely anal. I'm completely like control oriented. I just get to feel loosey goosey. And so I think the part of me that like I feel like for me, my relationship to change is one of submission, is one of like, I just have to submit that change happens and that it's there and that it's going to always happen and it's going to always be changing. And I'm going to always just have to go like, okay, cool. This is the change now. This is what's different. I have to receive it differently.
I can't remember who it was. Somebody I talked to, I don't even think on the podcast. Just in general, somebody shared with me that they have this like mantra for when things have already taken that left turn or whatever, big change just kind of drops on your head or whatever.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, I don't like this or I do like this, they just go, well, that just happened.
Yeah.
And that's like, that's their way of keeping cool and just going with the flow.
My friend has this phrase that he got from like I think it was from like Weight Watchers or something. Like he's been like an active Weight Watcher member for many years.
Weight Watchers is actually pretty great if you want like a few little like key phrases to think to yourself or like to handle whatever. You know what? For all I know, that just happened might have come from a Weight Watchers.
Might have, right? The one that made me think, the one it made me think of is when he was talking about a scale, weight scale kind of thing, and like people owning scales or not owning scales or whatever. And he was like, he like confessed. He was like, I bought a scale. And I was like, okay, is that what you wanted? did you want the scale? Do you need the scale?
Right. Yeah.
And he told me like the weight he was at. And then he just very calmly said, well, that was new information. And I was like, okay. And so now this is a phrase he comes back to when like things that are maybe not so pleasing or just like throw sort of a wrench in the plan. He's like, okay, well, that's new information, sort of in the vein of your friend of being like, that just happened. It's like, okay, these are
right. I think so much of the stress people feel sometimes is because they feel this pressure to make a choice about what's happening when really our feelings are complicated. Like I just was looking back at some of the experiences, thoughts, and writing that I did, a year ago at this time. And at the time of this recording, we're in the month of April. So April of 2020, I did a lot of thinking and writing about what was happening. And I really tried to hold in balance all of the feelings. There were things that were going well and things that were terrifying. There was lots of unknown and lots of known, like just like it is today, just like it is every day. But, also not like it is every day. I was talking to you before I hit the record button about how my brain makes these generalizations. And the same is true here, where I'm like, every day is the same. And also every day is completely different. To me, that's the nature of humanity, are these, it's not either or, it's both things are true. You can be terrified of change and excited at the same time.
Well, and I think you're hitting on something that I don't think that we we either talk about a lot, or maybe it's just not like put out there explicitly from when you're from at least when I was young, that like two things can be true at the same time. Like it doesn't have to be one or the other. All of the things can be on the table at the same time. It could be the buffet of things and it's all going to be okay. Like, or it's all going to just at least be what it is. So yeah, I think that we, especially as like young people, we get like taught to think that, it has to, the world, we're taught to maybe things are very black and white when we're young, right? Like we don't spend a lot of time with young people in terms of the gray area, which is a big disservice because that's where life happens. Like life is the gray area. And so I think that
I love that. That's ironically a really colorful description.
Right. I think as we get older, we sort of spend that time sort of like, unlearning that and sort of trying to take away that perception of like, it's got to be this or that. It can only be one or the other. Like there is no, and I feel like it's rooted in such a like pass or fail, succeed or fail kind of mentality that it's unsustainable and exhausting.
Well, speaking of change, I've been playing a game with some of my guests, and I think it'd be fun to play with you.
Yeah.
It's basically just a speed round because the name of the game is called Aiden Asks You a Bunch of Questions, and you try and answer them as quickly as possible.
I love it. I'm ready.
Okay. Cake or pie?
Oh, cake.
Why?
Frosting.
If you had to pick one outfit, I mean, it can grow and change with you as you grow, shrink, whatever. Yeah. But one outfit, one favorite outfit for the rest of your life, but it's the only one you get to wear, or a different outfit every single day, but you never get to wear the same outfit twice. So if you really like an outfit, it's gone. You already wore it.
Ooh.
Which one do you pick?
Oh, wow. I'm going to say the first one. The one fabulous outfit for my whole life.
Okay, why?
I like wearing a lot of sparkly and comfortable things, and I feel like sparkle and comfort are directly connected to like my heart in a lot of ways. Yeah, I like to be comfortable.
Makes sense. One single sparkly, comfortable outfit. Yeah. Basically like one juicy couture running suit and you're set.
Listen, the 17-year-old Marilet still wants like a pink, like velour tracksuit from like Juicy Couture. So.
They're out there somewhere. Imagine a world in which travel works the way we remember it working. You get onto an airplane and you sit down next to a stranger. Do you put on headphones and pretend you're on an airplane alone? Or do you strike up a conversation?
Oh, I chat. I'm a chatter.
Assuming, again, that travel works the same way that it used to. Yes. You check into a hotel. What's the first thing that you do?
I fully unpack. I fully just like put everything in its little spot. I make it my little home space. I just make sure that it feels like, and I always bring like a candle or something with me that like feels like something from my space. So I will definitely be like, all right, this is my space now. I've tended to the area to make it mine.
Let's talk about furniture. So when you arrange furniture, is it something that happens often? Are you constantly rearranging furniture? Or is it the kind of thing where you get a piece of furniture, it goes in its spot and it lives there until it dies, disintegrates, your house burns down, or you move?
Oh, I'm a rearranger. I like to reorganize the shui of my space pretty often.
Read any good books lately?
Yes. I recently read In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado, and it is I'm just like over the moon for this book. I read it maybe like over a month ago. I'm reading something else now, but I'm like, that was the last fully completed book I read, and it's the writer it's a memoir, and she plays with structure in such a creative, beautiful way. And then her phrasing is just like breathtaking and devastating and just like rich. So that's the most recent book I read, In the Dream House.
Last question. What's your favorite change, big or small, that you've ever made?
Favorite change, big or small? Well, moving to Chicago was a big fat change, and it's given me it's a gift that just keeps giving me more gifts. So I'm going to say my big fat move to Chicago change is my favorite.
Awesome. Thank you for playing. Aiden asks you a bunch of questions and you answer them as quickly as possible.
I love it. It's quippy.
Speaking of personal change and your own thoughts and feelings about it, if I ask you to identify a story, a moment from your life that was a real fork in the road where things noticeably changed after that moment, are you able to come up with are there like 1,000 stories there, or is it just like one immediately pops into your head?
There's so many, but there's a couple that came to mind immediately when we first sort of got the prompt. And initially I was like, well, I know, like, I wanted to pick one that wasn't like rooted in trauma, to be perfectly frank, or rooted in sort of like something that was really like that was painful, because I feel like that can absolutely be a huge source of change and shift for people. And it has been for me in my life. And I also am like, well, what are the moments of change where I felt excited, where I was sort of terrified and excited? What are those moments? So I reflected on that. And
cool.
The first thing that like really came to mind was my 18th birthday.
Is this the story you're ready to tell?
I'm ready to tell it.
Okay, great. Oh, I'm so excited. Okay, I'll get out of the way. Okay, great. Let's hear your story.
Yeah, so on my 18th birthday, I'm a summer baby. So I had just graduated high school the few months beforehand. I was 17, so I was going to be turning 18. And I had decided before graduating that I was going to take a year off of school. I wasn't going to immediately go to college. I wanted to take a year off. And I wanted to just like get a job, because I'd never had a job before. I wanted to just like be a human. I won this like scholarship from my school. So I was like, I could take some acting classes. I could do some other things before. And I was like, and then I'll apply to this like one school I want to go to. And like, if I get into that school, great. But I was really just sort of tossing all my eggs in that basket. And I was like, okay, on my 18th birthday, I'm going to like become an adult. I'm going to go after what I want. Like, I'm going to start my adult life. All 18 years of me was ready to go. And so I woke up early. It was a beautiful summer day. And I was like, all right, what are the things that I need to like prepare myself for this year before I like go to school or like apply for this, theater school. And I was like, okay, I need to take acting classes. I want to have like a sort of side hustle job. So I was like, I also want to get like my massage therapy license. And I was like, okay, I'm going to spend the day like researching and going to these places. This was like sort of early, this was like 2001, right? So like the internet isn't quite a baby, but it's still in its infancy, right? So I couldn't just like Google all the things. I looked things up in a phone book, Aiden. It was amazing. And so I jumped on the 19 Polk and I went over to the San Francisco School of Massage. I went to the Gene Shelton acting studio over on Powell or Sutter. And I just went to all these different places. And I had never been more excited to take the bus in my life. I had never been more excited. Like, I woke up feeling different. And I woke up like I've changed. I am putting on my adult pants. And I am going to go like take life by the horns today. I'm gonna set the foundation for the next year out today, all of today. And I spoke with all these, I spoke with the people at San Francisco School of Massage. I spoke with the Gene Shelton people. There was like one or two other places that I had gone to check out, and I was like, not for me. But all day long, I was riding around San Francisco or walking around San Francisco. It was a hot day too. And I just remember feeling palpably excited. And like, I feel different right now. I feel like something is shifting. I feel like I am changing my life today. Like that was like the thesis of the day. And I remember feeling like very adult about everything. Like by the time I got home, and it was maybe, I don't know, like 5 o'clock or something like that by the time, maybe a little earlier. And my nephew was there, who was maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 at the time. And I spent a lot of time caring for him, like being his nanny when he was very young. And so like, he's my little homie. So I was like, all right, little homie's here. We're going to hang out. And my mom was like, well, I need to go, run some errands or something to like Tan Fran, to like the mall. And I was like, all right, let's load up the baby and let's go. And so I closed out my big day of adult change by riding like a mall choo-choo train with my 3-year-old nephew. And like, just being like, okay, here we go. We rode the train, and then we went back to our house and like had a little water balloon fight because it was still summer. And at the end of the day, like, I just remember being like, this is it. This is it. I'm an adult. I'm doing it. Like, I actively did stuff today that's changing my patterns and habits. And it was so satisfying and so like exciting and scary, because I wasn't, like in this profession, like nothing's guaranteed. And really feeling like I had control or power over like this thing that I was like angling my life towards. And what a beautiful fantasy to live in at the beautiful age of 18. Fast forward years later, I'm like, I have control over nothing. But I remember just feeling absolutely like in my power that day, and feeling like I have the ability to change. I have the ability to shift or direct myself in the direction that I want to be choosing. That wasn't my family's choice. That wasn't, and not that they were unsupportive, but just sort of making my own way and really feeling like, okay, if this is something I'm going to do, like I'm in charge of doing it. I have to create that. I have to pave that road, because while my family has like artsy people in it, everybody's very like working class, like we work, we do things. And it wasn't like, yeah, let me go live my like artsy fartsy dreams. It was like, no, we got kids to feed and bills to pay. Like we can't do all that. So I in this one way, it was like a huge privilege to get to go be like one of the first people in my family to get to do that. And getting to feel like I was the catalyst for that. And I was getting to sort of create change, both for myself personally, but also for my family individually. But yeah, that's sort of the biggest, like when I think about sort of change in that regard, that's one of the sort of stories that sort of pops forward most in my mind.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that story. I love that you picked that moment. It brings back such terrific memories for me as well. And it's such a great reminder that like there are no rules that says we can't get into that 18-year-old mindset. Like it's really easy to look at that and be like, oh, foolish 18-year-old, you had no idea what taxes were yet. Right. But it's like, there's that thing where like, I remember the first time I had car keys in my hand, walking down the street and thinking everybody knew I had car keys now and cared about that. Like just being like, I'm the girl with the keys and I'm walking down the street. It's like, and just assume like in my mind, it's a movie and everybody's turning their head to look and be like, who's that girl with the keys? Yeah. But there's no rule that says we can't do that as adults. And probably we should. Like, I feel like, I'll work with clients. I'll do some self-coaching to sit down and do some looking ahead to just like work your way backwards. You go like, what do I want to be doing? I'm going to work my way backwards to where the starting point is. Yeah. And everyone's like, oh, dragging their feet. Nobody wants to do it. I don't want to sit down and do it either. And at 18, it was a different ballgame, right? At 18, you're like, what do I want to be when I grow up? All right, where do I start? Yeah. All right, I'm going to pull that phone book out and I'm going to start pounding the pavement. I'm going to find out what my future is. It's like we could all take an awesome page out of that book and allow that to inspire us in the present moment. That like take some time and just fantasize about what might be possible. And then, and enjoy it. Don't make it a chore. Make it an awesome like sequin covered sparkle experience.
Absolutely. I feel like I think the element of change that, historically may have snubbed or burned us, um, can be a daunting sort of entity, right? It sort of gets bigger than us. And
Yeah.
when we remember that change or shifting or really being able to sort of take agency in that regard in relationship to change, is a different like a different dynamic, right? And it's a different level of ownership and a different level of of influence that we are in charge of. And I think as we get older, we sort of feel like less and less and less is in our control. Less and less and less is possible for us to to sort of direct in any way. And like that sort of like unlearning process, that sort of like getting back to like that sense of like, well, why not? Why can't I get on the bus and make it happen?
I once met a woman in her, I didn't meet her in her 70s. I met her. And then in her 70s, many years later after I met her, she completely transformed her entire life. She just decided that she was going to just no longer own any property. This isn't for everybody, but that's what she decided. She's like, I'm just not going to own any property. I'm going to go work on an olive farm, and I'm just going to farm olives and live there and make olive oil. And I don't know why this opportunity came her way. This brand of olive oil, by the way, is one of my favorite brands. Like, it's just delicious. But at the time, it was this unheard of. Now, this was an unheard of brand of olive oil at the time. She's 70 years old. And I think what it allowed her to do was to actually live her best life, because she just worked in the sun during the day. She was working with fruit, and it's an organic product, and she just did yoga. And like, she then got so into yoga that she healed all of her aches and pains. It's a really like beautiful story. And then she was like, you know what? I'm going to teach yoga classes, and I'm going to make this olive oil salve. She had all this access to olive oil, and like, she just completely transformed. She's one of the youngest people that I know. She's now in her, she's got to be in her 80s. Good Lord. But she's just like this, like, I think now I'm going to go live in a hammock on the beach for the rest of my life or whatever. She's like, do more with less is kind of how she operates. And again, that's not for everybody. Her children are grown. She had no obligations. And having no obligations is kind of one of those markers of being 18 as well. But it's, it's like, what can we take and steal and still have be part of us, even when we do have obligations,
I love that. That's it really, it's making me think of sort of the importance of having multi-generational friends. I feel like I was really lucky growing up in my home, because I lived with my family, my brother and my sister, my mom, as well as my grandparents and my great uncle. And then we had like an influx of cousins and like other neighborhood kids that my grandma took care of in our house all the time. So it was many generations of people constantly in the house. And because of that, we got to sort of experience the many different levels of like joy, wisdom, growing pains, all of those things that come with being around people who are either much younger than you or much older than you. And I feel really, fortunate that in my life, I still am able to and I'm able to sort of maintain relationships with people who are not just my peers. And I think of age-wise. And it's been such a healthy reminder of like my own rigidity and my own like inflexibility, and being like, okay, like, there's even within ratas, right? Like, I am the oldest member of the team. I'll be 38 this year. And then Abby is our youngest member, and she's 22, I believe. So it's like, there's a little bit of time in there.
She's a baby.
She's young and like young with like a crap load of experience and just like a world of fierceness behind her, and getting to sort of see like how she approaches things or different ideas that she brings to the table. And I'm like, oh, I would have never thought of that. I have no idea about what that is. And then like taking that and talking to somebody who's, older than me and being like, what do you think about this? And they'll be like, well, and so like just getting different perspectives on different things, and getting to sort of learn from everybody and sort of seeing how being flexible to change and like having a relationship to change as we age is such an important part of our own plasticity as people and our own abilities to like grow, because if we sort of try and stay as fixed as we can, like that's anytime I've done that, I've hurt myself. And like, be it emotionally or physically.
Oh my God, yeah.
My body's just like, nope, take you out. And I'm like, okay. And then like literally having to like be laid up in a bed and submit to the fact that like, nope, okay, that thing's going to happen whether I want it to or not. Cool.
Right.
Yeah,
you know what that reminds me of is that do you know the finger thumb thing? Have you ever done this finger thumb thing? So the way it works is you start with both. Yeah, you start with your hands as fists in front of you. Okay. You do one thumb up and the other hand has the pointer finger pointing out away from you.
Okay.
And then you just take time to alternate which hand has the thumb and which hand has the pointer finger. So you just alternate.
Oh man.
And you build brain connections when you do this. But what's interesting, this is one of those experiences where what you'll notice is the harder you try to do it, you like try and force it, it feels really difficult. But if you can actually just kind of relax and just assume that you're capable of it, all of a sudden it becomes much more fluid, right? And you become more forgiving of those moments where it doesn't quite work. So to me, this is one of those things where it's like, and you can just like with anything, you can practice that and like get really, really fast at it, just like literally everything. But to me, it reminds me of that plasticity, that neuroplasticity that comes from forming new connections, and that simultaneous, like doing something challenging, but again, do more with less, like relaxing the muscles actually gets you more play. The harder you try and hold something, the more difficult it becomes. And to your point, you end up laid up in bed and you're like, I don't even get to do the finger thumb exercise now.
Exactly. I have fingers. Yeah.
I can't even do it.
It's tough. Yeah.
I have tendinitis and I'm stuck. Yeah.
Exactly. It's so funny though, too, because like as improvisers, right, sort of cycling back to something you said earlier, where there's this sort of perception of, you're the play people. You guys just kind of do all this all the time, like your guys are the wacky folks. There's a level of, I think, there's a perception that that in and of itself is illegitimate, and that there's not value to it, or because it's not commodified in the way that our capitalist society recognizes, right? And it doesn't make you a better this or that, supposedly, right? And it doesn't help your productivity necessarily, right? That's the sort of overt thinking. We all know that that's not the case. But it makes me think of like when where did it just came around? Because there's this perception of us being very open and like flexible and improvisational, and things just come and we're gonna be great with it. I'm always like, no, I feel like improvisers are kind of like a little bit the worst, because we have this idea of like, well, we have a structure and we have a this and we have it, like, I feel like we like hold on to the things that aren't supposed to change. And like are like, this is it. This is how we improv right. And so there's this perception of like, right and wrong.
Make it up correctly.
Exactly. And even as much as we like celebrate failure and cheer about it and talk about it, there is still a lifetime of conditioning that we are trying to undo by playing. And so we're constantly coming up against that. For me, at least, I'm constantly sort of coming up against that, where I'm like, ooh, gotta let that go. Ooh, gotta let that, like I could feel, I see this in myself all the time when I'm doing scenes where I'm like, okay, they said that thing. What does this need right now? How do we, make it, how do I make it better? How do I make it more make sense? How do I make it, how do I create the through line so that these two ideas are now connected? And, Like for me, I'm like, why are you trying to improv right? Like, just do the finger thing. Just do the finger. Just get out there and do the finger thing. And it's
just go out there and relax a little bit. Just relax and see what happens. Well, Marilet, I could easily spend the next 3 hours geeking out about how improvisers are also continually learning these lessons. But I'm hyper aware of the time. So instead of that, I'm just going to ask you, as we're going to gently bring this conversation to a close. I want to ask if you have any final words of wisdom or anything that you'd like people to take away, or projects you want to promote, anything that you want people to know about at the end of this conversation.
Yeah, it's going to be 37 minutes of me talking, but I will try and be concise. I think initially, like I was, one of the things about change that sort of kept coming as I was reflecting and preparing for this was like, and I say this a lot when I teach, is that growth is violent. It's a violent act. It happens. Like they're called growing pains for a reason. It's not like, I remember when my brother was like getting taller and he was just in wretched pain. And the very next day walked out of his room and was like 1.5 inches taller, and I was like, what happened? And so like, it's one of those things where I was like, and I think of like butterflies, right? Where it's like a caterpillar literally turns into goo before it turns into a butterfly. So there is this factor of change and this factor of evolution, really, that there is a violent element too. There is sort of this chaotic and almost painful experience with. And on the other side of that, the elements in which we can approach that growth or that change, sometimes the violence of that change, the way we approach it can be, it makes the difference. It makes the biggest difference, because if I'm willing to change, it makes the process that much more, it makes me that much more capable of receiving it. And I think there's a lot of times in the world where like things are, it takes us how many times to learn a particular lesson, right? Where like the universe is just going to keep bringing it back to you until you have like approached it in a different way, right? And that requires change, it requires shift, it requires all of this different level of sort of internal listening and flexibility that like, in that regard, like being gentle with ourselves when we're experiencing change and when we're sort of coming up against stuff that we feel that we are being sort of either pushed down by, instead of like getting this feeling, like really opening up our arms forward and being like, okay, let me, instead of trying to hold it up, how can I receive it and carry it differently? And those are things that I'm going to keep thinking about, like as the day, the week, the year goes on. I'm like, all right, like that's just the nature of us as humans.
Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. It's awesome to connect with you in this way.
So great to like reconnect with you and just like see you and spend this time together.
So, what do you want to be when you grow up? Hey, are you planning to go to school? And if so, what are you going to study? Listen, what kind of an impact do you want to have on the world? These questions sound familiar. I mean, when we're 16, 17, 18, we got to ask these questions all the time, right? But as adults, how often do you get asked those questions? Because for me, it's almost never. And the truth is, we could be asking each other. I don't know about you, but despite my age, aches and pains and taxes, there are multiple times daily when I do not feel like a grown-up. The thing that Marilet's story reminds me of is the best way to not feel like a grown-up, which is to simply get excited about taking steps towards something new. I mean, I remember from 4th grade through 9th grade, I always got so excited walking to that first day of school because it meant that I was older. And like me, you probably used to count your age in quarters. There was this sense that being a grown-up was the super cool thing that was going to happen to me later down the road. But now we're all here. We're grown up, and it's easy to hold the lens of exhaustion up to everything. Taxes again. Ugh, groceries. I don't want to go to the store. Fine, I'll drink another glass of water, and then I'm going to have to go to the bathroom again. What we send ourselves back to that beginner excitement, that beginner mindset, just for like an hour or maybe a day. I mean, maybe it'd be possible to maintain that feeling for a week. You know, that feeling of, I'm going to do something, it's going to be amazing. I'm going to take this on as a personal challenge for myself for the next few weeks, and I encourage you to do the same. And I want to hear about it. Have thoughts, feelings, sarcastic remarks, or a story to share based on listening to this episode? Help me keep the conversation going. Join the Facebook group, www.facebook.com/groups/ChangeHub. You never know who you're going to inspire. I want to thank Marilet for her story and for her thoughts. Special thanks go to my family for their love, support, and patience. To all of the amazing Changed Podcast Patreon page members who I couldn't do this without. Art of Change Skills for Life, and Patreon member producer, Dr. Rick Kirshner. And I thank you for listening. I'm Aiden Nepom, and I wish you the kind of experiences in life you're excited to tell stories about.